Hello and welcome. I'm Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you're doing well today. Please be aware I will be dealing with mature content, as I'll be obviously looking at true crime events, and all cases are treated as alleged until proven in a court of law. These are my opinions. Let's get into it. All right, so today's case, I'm doing the Springfield 3, or the case known as Springfield 3, and the three ladies went missing under suspicious circumstances, of course, on the 7th of June, 1992. All right, so let's get into it. I've done my meditation, and I have been looking at this case off and on for the past few days. I've done several meditations on this. And just for full disclosure, I did look a little bit at the nature of the case. And I do believe there was a list of perpetrators possibly involved. And for some reason, the name Robert Craig Cox did resonate with me and ping on me. And I know there is a text, or there's an article that says he will reveal what happened when his mother dies. So, or I should say, shame on him for putting his mother through this distress, right? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the three ladies first. And the reason being is there's something very significant about all of their three dates of births, right? So we have Cheryl, Susan, commonly known then as Susie, and Stacy, her good friend. Okay. Now Cheryl is obviously Suzanne's mother. And it's interesting if you look at their dates of birth. You know, when parents have their kids, particularly if there's one or more, it's always interesting to note that one of the kids will mirror the one adult, and the other kid might mirror, and the one kid might mirror the other parent. And in this case here, Cheryl and Susie, you can see the bottom two lines of the 12, 3, and the 9. They match completely with the outcome 12, 3. Now, I would say Cheryl and Susie were like the two identical people. They were a pea in a pod. If there was any doubt that Susie was the biological child, there's no doubt at all, right? And it's interesting that their numbers match up identically. What's also interesting is Stacy pretty much shares the same numbers as well, the 9 and the 3 and the 12-3 outcome. So all three have a 12-3 outcome. And that's, being a 12-3 in the case of women is very much about look, design, looking good, always presenting themselves properly, particularly in public spaces. Particular about jewelry. I mean, you can see with Cheryl with those earrings. That's typical of a person with a 3, very much concerned about their look, how they are perceived in society. And what's also interesting about Susie and her mom Cheryl, having the 9s in the year, also very important. I would say in both cases, and more so with Susie, those 9s are very creative numbers. It's the higher self number. It's also the capacity for higher learning. And very good numbers, I must say. Very, very good numbers. I would say a little bit of reservation in terms of Susie's numbers is that she has 999s and 333s in her date of birth, right? And full disclosure, I did read she was kind of a Energizer bunny. Now, if you look at her mom, she's also got 2 9s and 2 3s, whereas Susie's got 3 9s and 3 3s. So if you thought Cheryl was outgoing and bubbly and out there, Susie was like on steroids, right? She was full of energy, full of ideas, and very lovely numbers and lovely people. So let's look at the unfortunate incidents that happened here. And we know Susie and Stacy had just graduated, and they were out and about on the evening of the 6th. And I've just created a bit of a different grid here, and I think I'll use this grid going forward because obviously in a lot of crime cases, in most crime cases, time is a factor. So I've illustrated here, and just to point out for the new viewers, so mostly on the right-hand side, you have the month, day, and the year. And then on the left, I've got the time frame. And in this case, time was important because we have reports that Cheryl was last heard by the neighbor at around 11:15 on the 6th of June. And there's eyewitnesses that see Susie and Stacy. Someone saw them at 2 o'clock. So I've illustrated that in the timeline, in the line where the numbers are. And let's get into it. The day before, the day of the graduation party or day of graduation, that's 6th of June. That day in itself is massive because you've got the 3 6s and you've got the 3 3s, high energy. And like I mentioned earlier, with Susie and Cheryl's energy, I mean, that day they would be pinging like you can't believe. The energy was high. And with those 3s, it's all about the feminine energy as well. However, unfortunately, when we're dealing with crime, we see that famous 21-3 again. And that 21-3, unfortunately, pops up in crime cases, terribly so. So on the day before, the 6th of June, we see the mass of 6s, mass of 3s. So big celebration. So if we take it from a party perspective in terms of Susie and Stacy going around town, big parties, big celebrations, and it's all community-based, it's all groups, because obviously there were pockets of students celebrating. So that's what it was all about. Now, what concerns me and trying to figure out when the crime happened. So let's start off by saying between 6 p.m. and midnight of the 6th, we see that 15-6 outcome there, right? So that's the time when Cheryl was at home, right? Now that 15-6 alludes to males, dirty old males, males behaving badly, but more on a sexual side and aggressive side. Not necessarily sexual, but aggressive. That 6 can be very aggressive, can be very violent. We're talking guns, knives. So let's just have a look here. I believe the perp was in the house when Susie and Stacy entered. And the reason I say this is because that 15-6 ends at midnight, which means the perp was on the scene before midnight. So Susie and Stacy would have walked into a situation, and I believe Robert would have been disrupted, or let's say he would have been interfered with when the 2 girls arrived on the scene as well, right? So I believe, based on the numbers and the breakdown of time, that Robert Craig Cox would have entered the scene between 11:15 and midnight. Okay. Now, I don't believe it would have been between 1 and 2 because, like I say, that 15-6 is already sitting there. So that tells me that there's males around, males behaving badly around, and of course, we know that something bad happened in the house, right? Now, out of the list of potential suspects, for whatever reason, obviously we know the reason, but Robert Craig Cox was pinging on me dramatically out of all the list of perpetrators, right? And he's the one that says he will reveal all when his mom dies. So I pulled out his date of birth, which is obviously the 6th of October, and he was born in 1959. So you can see with his profile there, he's got 3 6s. Now that already tells me that person's going to be, on the normal, OCD, very hyper, a lot of energy, lots going on with this particular person. And because we're looking in a negative context, in a negative state, he has that 16-7, which is not a great number. If you guys watched my, which was a week or so ago, the Gilgo Beach serial killings, that 16-7 alerts me to serial killer, murderous intentions, the bad human committing murder. And that 16-7 is sitting with Robert, unfortunately, and he has a life path 13-4. Now, a person that has a life path 4, and obviously there's different variations in getting to that 4. That particular 13-4 that he has is actually a terrible number. And that 13-4, if you had to compare it to tarot cards, is the death card. Now, of course, it doesn't only mean the death card, right? But he's the kind of character that if he dismisses you or cuts you off, he will do it in a whim, in an instant. He has no qualms or problems killing someone or stealing. It's all in his numbers, okay? So if you look at his date of birth, he's got those 666s. The day leading up to the event, we got 666s, so it's pinging directly on Robert. We got the 3-3s that are pinging directly on the 3 women because they've all got 3s. And leading up to that, we know then when we go into the next day is when the event happened, the 7th of June. Now, that 7 also alerts me to something, right? So let's have a look here. So we know the perp would have entered between 11:15 and midnight. That's because of the numbers 15-6. And on the 7th of June, we have that 7 highlighted in red. That's 7. So that for me bothers me. Because as the reports say, people arrived on the scene, and I believe some of their friends arrived at 9 a.m. So I've indicated that there. Now, they would have arrived after the 7. So in other words, what I'm getting to, between midnight and 6 a.m., and we know Susie and Stacy were last seen at 2 a.m., that 7 comes into play. And that 7, unfortunately, deals with kidnapping. Okay? So we know from witness accounts that when Kirby and her boyfriend arrived on the scene, there was no one there. Everything looked undisturbed. And this is, I've just been pinged on this again to remind me, and that is, I believe that this person, whoever it was, and I believe the strong candidate is Robert, would have been known to the community, would have been familiar to the community. He would have been familiar to that community as well. He would have known the ins and outs, the roads, etc. I believe the person was more known to the community than not. It wasn't, I don't believe it was a passerby. This person would have had some knowledge about the community that they were in. So that we have the 7 in the morning. Now that 7 comes into play from midnight to 6 a.m. And unfortunately, that does deal with kidnapping. And I do believe there was definitely more than one male on the scene. There would be at least 2 males. That shows me the 14-5. But it wouldn't be more than 4 people, right? So I don't believe it was a group of people. So let's look at the 7th of June in that grid. That 7 pings on Robert. The 6 pings on Robert. The 13-4 pings on Robert. And the 16-7 pings on Robert. So, I believe that Robert Cox matches these numbers spot on. And so much so that it would be the equivalent, and I know this is not the case in reality, but because of the numbers that I'm seeing, that is as good as finding DNA on the scene, right? So from a numerology point of view, I mean, we've got 4 numbers here that ping directly on Robert Craig Cox. So for me, without a doubt, he's definitely on the scene, right? So what happened to these ladies? So I believe they were kidnapped and taken away. And unfortunately, to be quite honest, I don't think they would have been around for more than 48 hours after the event, unfortunately. And the reason why I point that out, we've got several detrimental numbers here. We've got, of course, the 13-4. We've got the 16-7. And we've got the 14-5. And we have the 18-9. Now, unfortunately, I don't believe they would have gone on more than 48 hours or 72 hours maximum. So the question that we're asking is, will Robert come forward and reveal the truth in the future? So I'm just going to see if I can pick up anything on that. So where are we now? We are in 2024. So I'm just pulling out the years. 26. Yeah, I don't think he's going to reveal. Let's see here, 2024. All right, let me see if I pick up anything. I don't know. There's a bit of doubt. But the doubt that I'm getting is not because he doesn't want to. There could be something going on with him as well in the next year or so. But in my mind, and based on this grid, I believe that Robert Cox was definitely on the scene, without a doubt. I mean, his main numbers, 16, 7, and 13, 4, are reflected on the day. Now, because the crime would have happened so early in the morning, we will already see evidence in the outcomes of that event, like the 13, 4, 16, 7. Yeah, what lovely souls these three women were. And will there be justice? And when you have all those threes, this is the terrible thing about crime, and in particular male committing crimes, is the heavy presence of threes. It's all about abuse and control. These technically insecure males, because I can tell you now, Robert Craig Cox, that's 16-7, that's 7 in the middle of his day, is big insecurities. Big, big, big insecurities. And of course, that what takes over is the physicalness and the abuse that comes with that. A real sod, this guy, Robert. I would say he was definitely on the scene on this one. I'm getting mixed communications about, will the truth ever come out about this case? And I do believe in some way Robert is toying with the idea, but it's not so much about revealing what happened. It's about still creating issues around this case from a control point of view, or he has the information, so he's not going to release it. But I definitely believe, regardless of what he does and what he decides to do, if there was any doubt whether he was on the scene, there's no doubt at all. All right, let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching the show today. Please hit that subscribe button. If you have not subscribed, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and stay alert.